also the organizer of the Agile DC conference. That's a yearly conference, and we generally get about 650 attendees and speakers, and that's a for-benefit conference, and one of my passions is philanthropy, and last year out of that conference, myself and the other organizers were able to donate about $45,000 to not-for-profits of our choice. Today I'm going to be talking about a little introspection, not really talking about work that we're doing outside of our organization, but talk about some of the work we're doing inside our organization as we've moved to a Teal culture, a self-organizing, self-managing culture internally. So yeah, please feel free to grab any questions anytime. Stephanie will be monitoring those and ping them over to me. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, directly, let Stephanie know, and she can open up your mic and allow you to ask that question. Okay, so wanted to start with our mission. The reason that is important is we feel that our goal as LitheSpeed and as LitheSpeeders is to make people's work more productive, valued, and fulfilling. We're trying to do that in our community, and especially for the folks that work with us at LitheSpeed. So first I'd like to start with what is Teal. I know some of you may be familiar with Frederic Laloux's work, but some of you may not. So I'm going to actually show a little video by Peter Green. But Teal organizational model is we believe, a great model for organizations like ours. It will improve our ability to change, to allow people that work within our organization to grow, build products and services that they're passionate about, and bring their whole selves, their passions to work, and give them the freedom to be able to do that within the LitheSpeed organizational context. So I'm going to play a video by Peter Green, and the link to this video will be coming out from Stephanie in the near future, probably directly after this webinar. But I think this video gives a great sort of 50,000-foot overview of what Teal is. So with that, I will start.
In a fascinating book called Reinventing Organizations, author Frederic Laloux recounts the evolving history of how people have worked together in large organizations and how new perspectives or paradigms have emerged over the centuries that unlocked new levels of prosperity as they became the predominant approach. In this video, we'll take a look at these paradigms, then examine how they can inform our thinking about adopting agile or lean approaches. Each new paradigm is described by its own color, has some unique characteristics, and some breakthrough ideas. And we'll look at some examples of organizations operating under each paradigm today. We will start with the oldest paradigm, described by the color red. The guiding metaphor for red is that of the wolf pack. Red emerged as people organized into tribes and was the predominant paradigm for centuries. The defining characteristics of red include a powerful leader who inspires fear in the group's enemies and compliance within the group. Red is most useful in situations of chaos, where the powerful leader may be the only thing guaranteeing the survival of the group. The breakthrough ideas of red are command authority, where a leader can set a direction and people will follow, allowing them to work towards a common goal, and division of labor, where people can specialize in a specific type of work that benefits the overall group. Examples of organizations functioning under the red paradigm today include the mafia, street gangs, and tribal militias. Red organizations are limited by the short-term perspective required to survive chaos. The next level, amber, evolved when the instability of fear-based power structures could not accomplish longer-term success. The guiding metaphor for amber organizations is that of an army. Amber emerged as hierarchical patterns like those invented by the Roman military under Julius Caesar and those used by the Catholic Church, enabled focusing on long-term goals, which are only possible under stable leadership, being based on status, not physical prowess. The primary characteristic of amber organizations is their strict hierarchical structure, leading to stability and exerting strong control over the lower levels in the hierarchy. The breakthrough ideas in an amber organization are taking a long-term perspective, instituting strong processes, and creating formal roles for various levels within the hierarchy. Examples of current organizations that have an amber perspective are most public schools in the United States, most governments, and traditional churches. Amber organizations begin to hit their limits when conditions change that require new approaches. The next level, orange, evolved when entrenched amber organizations were unable to adapt to changing conditions. The guiding metaphor for orange is that of a machine. Orange emerged in the Age of Reason, along with the American and French revolutions, where individual meritocracy meant that the best ideas had a chance of competing regardless of an individual's status. The primary characteristics of orange organizations include competition within the organization and with other organizations, a focus on financial profit and growth, and a switch to objectives-based management, where leaders set the strategy and lower levels within the hierarchy are given some freedom in how to carry out the strategy. The breakthrough ideas in an orange organization are innovation, accountability for reaching the objectives laid out by management, and meritocracy, where individuals can rise within the organization based on their skill, intelligence, and creativity. Orange is the predominant perspective in the world today, and nearly all large corporations function from an orange perspective, as well as many public universities. Orange begins to hit its limits when people feel that the profit motive is not fulfilling enough, often becoming disengaged with the organization's view of them as cogs in a machine. A 2013 Gallup poll showed that only 30% of U.S. workers were engaged at work, a strong signal of the limits of an orange perspective. The next level, green, has emerged as people have sought more meaning in their work. The guiding metaphor for green is that of the family. The primary characteristics of green organizations are a focus on delighting customers, making decisions based on a set of shared values, and high engagement from everyone in the organization. The breakthrough ideas are balancing the needs of all stakeholders, including customers, employees, partners, and shareholders for publicly held companies, a focus on culture over strategy, and true empowerment of members in the organization regardless of their hierarchical level. Examples of organizations that have a green perspective are Southwest Airlines and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. The Agile and lean movements also emerge from companies with this perspective. Green begins to hit its limits when consensus building results in overly slow decision-making, and the hierarchical structures still existent in green begin to conflict with people's desires to have greater autonomy. The next level, teal, is emerging as organizations have discovered how to work effectively without hierarchical structures. The guiding metaphor for teal is that of a living system. The primary characteristics of a teal organization are what are known as anti-fragile organizational structures, either flat or based on interlocking circles of evolving roles, aligning around an evolutionary purpose, some shared goal of making the world a better place, and by distributing decision-making authority to all members of the organization using something called the advice process, where any colleague can make any decision in the organization so long as they have sought the advice of anyone that decision might impact. This differs from consensus in that not all advice must be heeded, just considered. The breakthrough ideas in teal are wholeness, where people can bring their whole selves to work, their spiritual side, their intellectual side, and their creative side, and feel safe that they will not be judged for being themselves. Self-management is another breakthrough idea. In most teal organizations, there are no managers, and an evolutionary purpose, meaning that the purpose is not owned by any one person, but evolves as new people join the organization and as the organization learns more about how it can make the biggest difference in the world. Examples of Teal organizations include Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company, Morningstar, a tomato processing plant responsible for 40% of the tomato products in the United States, and Birdsorg, a 7,000-person home care nursing organization. Agile and Lean are firmly rooted in green, and most of the struggles we see with adoption are in organizations whose leadership have a dominant orange perspective. To someone with an orange perspective, Agile and Lean are seen as simply process improvements to increase productivity, efficiency, or profits. But without adopting the cultural perspectives of green, only those practices that align with orange are adopted, and they are overlaid against orange approaches like top-down management, or valuing profit against any other outcome. Agile thrives in organizations with a predominantly green perspective, and Agile practices become almost overkill in a Teal organization, which have evolved their own practices that include Agile values, but where many Agile practices are no longer required, for example, a single product owner. If you are currently part of an orange organization and are looking for ways to make it work better, search out others with a green perspective, especially those in leadership positions, and work with them to help drive the cultural change required to make Agile work as it was designed. Laloux's research indicates that only the top leader in an organization can successfully transform it vertically, for example, from orange to green. However, horizontal transformation is possible, for example, working within the boundaries of orange to make it a more vibrant place of innovation and objectives-based management, instead of a stressful, lifeless place of micromanagement. One important concept is that one color is not necessarily better than any other. There are valuable ideas in every perspective. There is data that shows that the newer perspectives are better able to deal effectively with increasing levels of complexity and interconnectedness. But that does not mean that every situation requires this, or that only green and teal organizations can be successful. Success is defined differently from each perspective. Also, the newer perspectives include the older ones, like a Russian nesting doll. So someone with a teal perspective can and should continue to use orange or amber ideas when they might best meet the needs of the organization. I hope this overview was helpful, and that it gave you some insight into the culture of your organization. Viewing Agile and Lean within this broader cultural context can help us make sense of why some organizations might struggle to fully adopt them, and give us some ideas of how to focus on culture as a key element in any change.
Okay, so you may occasionally see some Dropbox things pop up. Apologize for that, but that's just because I'm on the network and I don't want to get off at this point. I'd like to open it up and ask if there were any questions about the video, the Laloux Teal video.
Nothing that's come in thus far.
Okay, great. Well, if something comes up, please let us know. So, as the video mentioned, Teal really relies on some of the practices from the levels below, such as empowerment, value-driven culture, stakeholders, valuation, and as most of you can sort of glean from that, that aligns really well with the Agile perspective. So, I guess the question that many people might ask is why did we want to start an internal transformation at LitheSpeed towards Teal? And honestly, the answer is as soon as the founders, Sanjeev Augustine, Arlen Bankston, saw it, they introduced it to a number of people within the organization, and we immediately said, yes, this is absolutely what we want to do with LitheSpeed. We want to try to move more directly towards self-management and evolutionary purpose. We're a small organization, so we were already kind of bringing our whole selves to work, so that was not really going to be an innovation for us. But this idea that the purpose of the organization could evolve as people's interests drove them to start new new initiatives to align their personal work with their professional passion, and increased self-management. We realized that as we grew, we did not, in fact, want to grow a hierarchy within the organization beyond founders and LitheSpeeders, that we wanted people to be able to self-manage, to direct their daily lives and align that with the organization's evolving purpose. And we'll talk quite a bit about some of the things that we've tried, places where we've succeeded, and places that we've been challenged in this transformation. So we're here to talk about our journey at LitheSpeed. Understand that to undertake this, you are inevitably going to be adopting some practices that you believe will help. Those experiments, some of them work and some of them provide you with a reasonable level of challenges, and we'll talk a little bit about this. In Laloux's book, he talked about a number of organizations. Buurtzorg, which is a very large home health care organization with squads of nurses out delivering home health care. Morningstar, an organization that delivers over 40% of the tomato products in the U.S. It's a traditional farming, farm packing, processing, and distribution organization. I talked about Favi, which produces auto parts in Europe, and how these organizations had moved to what he was now categorizing as a Teal model. Now, all of those organizations adopted very different strategies. Morningstar has been involved in self-management for a very long time. Buurtzorg and Favi adopted very different particular practices to run their organization. And that led us to believe that we were going to have to sort of create a model that works for LitheSpeed and for the LitheSpeeders. We're going to talk a little bit about different areas of LitheSpeed and how we've adapted and adopted practices that are helping us move towards Teal. So first we're going to talk about structure of our organization and how we're moving towards self-organized and empowered teams. The Valve, for those of you who are not familiar with the Valve Handbook, it is a great read, and it talks about how they work. They have essentially a very flat organization. They sometimes look at it as formal networks or organic, or a flat organization where they're either guiding the organization or the organization is guiding them. So at LitheSpeed, we essentially said, well, we're going to get rid of our traditional titles. So in the past, I was a senior vice president, and occasionally when I have to sign documents, I still use that, but I think of it more as a hashtag. And quite often, you'll see emails from LitheSpeeders, and they will say change agent at LitheSpeed, or Agile adoption expert at LitheSpeed. We've sort of moved towards making up our own titles. We also love the Spotify model of tribes, and what we did is we decided that we would break out into self-organizing tribes of people that would have a great deal of empowerment and self-governance, being able to make decisions internally within the tribe, and some of those decisions would even affect LitheSpeed as a whole. We We decided that a tribe has to start out with a minimum of 3 people, and we're looking ideally for a mix of delivery and operations. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a ton of dependencies between tribes. We started out with several tribes. We grew to 3 tribes, and then some of those tribes actually closed up shop and people moved. We have the law of 2 feet. Anyone at LitheSpeed can start their own tribe if they can get a couple of other people to wander off into the wilderness to start that tribe, or they can move from one tribe to another. And a great example of that was we had a tribe called Quest, and that tribe had myself and Amanda Geary in it, along with a number of other people. There was also at that time a tribe called Fresh, which has since dissolved. And Amanda said one day that, you know, I really work a lot with Joe Quaglio, who some of you may know if you know our organization. Said, I work very closely with Joe. It doesn't make sense for us to be in separate tribes. And she said, I'm going to go start a tribe with Joe. Does anyone want to come? And I said, well, yep, I had been in Tribe Called Quest. I had originally been the leader of Tribe Called Quest. And then Tribe Called Quest said, you know, we all agreed that we didn't really need a formal leadership structure. So we had sort of flattened out TCQ itself. And I said, yeah, I'll go join District 51. We'll concentrate on government work and the local DC market and training. I'll go start a tribe with you, Amanda. Now, this did not come from Sanjeev or Arlen. It was brought up from Amanda Geary. Anybody that knows us and knows her will realize that she does a ton of work at home and at her school, and she's a 20-hour-a-month employee. So the person who is a 20-hour-a-month hourly employee was able to reorganize LitheSpeed, and we think that is a really powerful idea. Since then, Fresh has kind of been absorbed into Tribe Called Quest, and that tribe went away. So it sort of shows the organic growth model that we're striving for at LitheSpeed. So we have people, they're organized in tribes. Tribes can make decisions about how they govern themselves. So a lot of people say, well, how do we do recruiting? How do we do hiring? How do we do benefits? How do we do those things that Google calls people operations? Well, for us, the organization decided that, you know, tribes hire, tribes fire. So employees within LitheSpeed can say, I think we really need to hire a person. They can then try to, you know, use the advisement process that we'll talk about in a moment and say, you know, can we get salary for that person? And they're hired into a tribe. Now, we do have the rule that when you're hired into a tribe, you stay there for 3 months. You get your feet. And then if you want to go out, form a new tribe or move to a different tribe, that's completely okay. But you get onboarded into a tribe by the tribe. You don't need global okay to hire. You just need to make sure that you have salary. And that we still have to go to the founders for. We'll probably be moving to a system where we don't in the future, but we're still trying to work out the mechanics. So hiring, that's the easy part, right? Everybody likes the fun part of HR, but how do we how do we deal with performance or firing? Well, our model has been that we try to give opportunities for direct feedback from tribe members and organization to everyone in LitheSpeed. When we need to fire someone, we will actually do that as employees and try to work with them first to make it work, to sort of correct, and then give an exit package to have them move on to a job where they can work out well. Now, we've never actually had to fire anyone. We have had issues where we started working with people who were having issues transitioning, making it in this new model, and they decided to leave. We did not actually give them a formal exit offer, but eventually, as we grow, we'll inevitably cross this bridge, and it will be our responsibility as employees to help them transition out of the organization. And there's lots of reasons why people might not like working in a Teal organization. We understand that. So how do we work together? Well, we have an open schedule. There's no set policy of when people have to be at work, when they take vacation, how they spend their time, whether they're focusing on innovation, whether they're focusing on delivery, whether they need some free time or some buffer time. That time is the time that you need to sort of take care of emails and other internal stuff. What we do expect is that everyone is deeply engaged and fully engaged when they are working with us. On average, we expect most people to work about 40 hours a week, but any given week might vary quite a bit. And we have no fixed vacation policy. So some people, take a reasonable amount of vacation. Now, how would we manage that if that is abused? We're going to manage that through the peer review and commitment processes that we have in place with folks. How do we determine salary and profit? Well, our goal has always been to do a fair market salary. We want to be able to pay people enough so that they are engaged, but we also are moving towards open and team set salaries. So what that will mean is everyone, when we do implement this, everyone within LitheSpeed knows how much everyone else is making, and we're going to have an objective system to be able to set salaries, and that will actually allow us as employees to understand and be able to hire and set salary for people that we're hiring into the organization. We also realize that people need flexibility in their lives. So as we set up this open salary policy, we're also going to have some level of salary mobility. And what that means is if someone says, well, I've been working 100%, so a full down to meet that. And that'll be part of our team set salary model. We also want people to be able to say, be able to move up and down in their responsibilities within the organization, because a lot of people find themselves stuck, and the best way they can get a raise is to actually quit and move to another organization where they have a greater degree of responsibility. At LitheSpeed, we believe you should be able to take on that greater responsibility, take on that larger domain of creating profit for everyone, and be rewarded for that. We do have this idea within LitheSpeed that we're treating others in the organization as we would our families if we are the breadwinner for the family. So folks in the front office, people out delivering services, delivering training, delivering consulting, know that as part of their job, they're not only covering their own salaries, but they've got to make it work for LitheSpeed. That everybody's salaries depends on our ability to maintain profitability and to keep cash flow coming. But we also realize that as LitheSpeed profits, our employees should profit along with that. And very early on in this process, the founders said, we really want to put in a profit share model that allows employees to share the profit that LitheSpeed generates. And as we looked at it and sort of scratched our head and tried to figure out how do we determine how profits are split, it became very clear that that was going to be a sort of top-down model, until the founders said, here's the money for the quarter. Employees, you figure out how to split it, how to share the profit. And we've run a number of different experiments on how best to do that. Right now, we take that profit share, we distribute 90% of the profit evenly among all employees based on how much they're working. So if someone is only working half time, then they get half of that direct profit share split, half of their piece of that 90%. And then we reserve 10% of profit shares for the ability of employees to give a little bit to another employee. So 10% of the quarterly profit share is split using a recognized system. So I, for example, could send an email that says, +1 recognized for Stephanie for facilitating this great webinar, or I could say +2. And essentially, at the end of the quarter, that 10% is split up based on how many recognized emails or votes that person got over the quarter. That's just a nice way to sort of acknowledge that someone helped you, and have a little bit of money go along with it, but not enough that it's worth gaming the system. So that 10% is, a nice little gesture, but it doesn't drive some of the bad behavior that we see with normal profit-sharing systems, where there's a lot of sort of jockeying for favor as the end of the quarter rolls in, so that you can maximize your profit share or bonus. Because what we really want is we want to set up a system that salary and profit share are fair, but we're not creating internal struggles for people to try to maximize that and create a lot of bad behavior within the organization. The other thing that we have as an organization is we need to run the business. We need to be able to resolve conflicts, make decisions, and execute on those decisions. So when I say operations, I don't necessarily mean invoicing and billing, but how do decisions get made, and how do we resolve conflicts? So our decisions within the organization are based on the advisement process, and that just is relatively straightforward. It is not a consensus process. You're required to reach out, talk with, take advisement from anyone who would be affected by the decision that you're making. And you can go against their advice, and your decision will still stand, and your decision can only be vetoed if someone can raise an immediate, not some potential future threat to LitheSpeed's reputation, to LitheSpeed's money that is coming in, and legal, if there's a potential legal problem with that decision. Those are the three reasons that someone in the organization can veto it. Now, if your decision has an effect on or needs funds to execute, like if I said I think we need a new building, then obviously the people that are most affected are the founders and the folks that hold the keys to those sort of funding decisions. But other decisions can be taken internally in the tribe. Now, if, for example, you want to create a new line of business, you can take that decision. You need, within LitheSpeed, we have a rule that if you really want to try some business experiment, and you're willing to be the champion of that innovation, most recently we put in a model where it's champion plus two. You can find two other people that are willing to invest their time, energy, and interest in it. Then you can sort of run with that experiment. And quite often, we do need to go and say, hey, we're going to need some funding for marketing or other things. At some point, we'll figure out whether we can push some of that funding decisions down. But for now, we're using more of an orange or green model where we have to go back and make a more global ask in the organization for funds. We also realized that we did not want to be managers, and we are not your parents. As founders, as folks who used to be managers or executives at LitheSpeed, you're expected to work it out. You're expected to give immediate feedback to other people, to seek immediate feedback, and to adjust accordingly. If you have a real conflict that you can't work out, you can ask for, if both parties can agree on another third person that they want to mediate their disagreement or their grievance. Great. If that person is unable to mediate, that third person mediator has no decision authority. They can only help facilitate the conversation between two parties. If that does not work, then unfortunately it goes back up to the founders to make a decision one way or the other. We haven't really had a ton of this, but as we grow, I expect we will start to see more of that conflict. Once a quarter, we try to, we expect people to give and take feedback immediately. We also have sort of like the daily stand-up being a stopgap for raising impediments. You should have raised them immediately, but if they don't, then you raise them at the daily stand-up. For us, quarterly, we do a personal review where we rate everybody, our peers in the organization, on how effective they are at self-managing, how much they contribute to the culture and to the company, and we try to make that direct. So if I gave feedback to another employee, when I fill out that survey, I have to give my name and give both a rating and some direct feedback. This feedback is not tied to salary or bonuses. This is for understanding how you're viewed in the organization, for self-improvement, and for the ability to grow and get feedback from peers. And we're experimenting on a number of different ways, and eventually we hope to get this right, or it may just continue to be an ongoing experiment. Innovation, sustainment, and financials. We do expect everyone to be a little bit innovative in our culture, to create new opportunities. Great example of that, Joe Quaglio, who I mentioned earlier, recently said, hey, I would like to help build a Agile placement services. We have coaches, we place coaches, but we don't necessarily place Scrum Masters much, or Agile testers, or Agile engineers, and I'd like to start that up. I said, great, I'll help out. Not my passion, but he's willing to champion it. And we're currently bringing that new product to market. It's a whole new line of business, suggested by an employee, supported by other LitheSpeeders, and ultimately supported by the founders that said, great, if you guys have the passion to do that, run the experiment, and we'll see how that works out. Now, the great thing with experimenting and innovation is we don't have to get everything right. What we do need to do is keep innovating, keep experimenting, double down on the winners, and pivot or kill things that aren't working. This is part of the Teal process, where everybody is expected to innovate, and the organization gives enough freedom to allow that innovation to happen and to move the direction and the purpose of the overall organization. As I mentioned,
we have an incoming question.
Excellent.
Wanted to know if we have defined roles as far as job roles, and what those roles might be as far as expectations.
We don't have, we're not as strictly defined in the roles. Right now we have LitheSpeeder, and there's a general breakout between folks that are front office, the trainers, coaches, consultants, and then folks that are taking on primarily back office tasks, such as marketing or sales or training operations or HR, invoicing, AR. We certainly have people that specialize in that, and that tends to be relatively fluid. Now, that being said, we are working on a more formalized way of taking on those activities as an individual. So we kind of think of activities that need to be done for the organization, who's going to do them. So we're currently implementing something that comes from Morningstar. We're just at the beginning stage of this, and that is a colleague letter of intent. And that is a more formal agreement that says, I want to take on these activities in the organization, and here's who I'm working with within the organization to perform those activities, and here's how I pledge as a LitheSpeeder to contribute to that activity. And I guess a good example of fluidity is, for example, sales. We have a couple of folks. Stephanie is one of them. Cheryl Chamberlain is another who's keenly focused on sales. And that being said, everybody participates in some way, either on sales calls. We might get a lead, and as a LitheSpeeder, if I get a lead and I want to put out a statement of work for that, I'm expected to move that ahead, and I don't just say, oh, this is only Stephanie or only Cheryl's domain. I certainly need to let them know and use the advisement process and everything else. But and the same is true of any other activity. A lot of people help out with training operations or other activities. Does that make sense?
Yep, I think you answered the question.
Excellent. So one of the things that we've seen is this idea of sustainment. How do we keep the lights on at LitheSpeed? We had some initial thrash around this internally, and it was seen as being sort of an orange command and control model, where we said, if you are billable, you need to bring in a certain amount of money each month, and we're still sort of struggling with how to make that visible and viable. We started posting internal. All of the financials are open now, so really the trainers and coaches can see those financials, but a lot of us, well, not me, but a lot of the trainers and coaches haven't necessarily run businesses. So this is an area where we need to make the information available, and we're trying to come together on what is a way that is not very command and control, to make sure that we're all doing what we need to keep the jobs for everybody that we love working with. It's about making sure that the company as a whole is viable. It's no longer just the founder's responsibility. We believe it's everyone's responsibility to understand and do that. And that actually takes a little bit of, takes the information, but also takes a little bit of training to be able to do that. So where are we now? Well, we're over a year into this transformation. When we first started, the founder Sanjeev and Arlen said, I think it's going to take us about 3 years to get there, because this transformation is a cultural one. We need to build up our own internal processes, and some of us kind of looked around and said, 3 years, that seems like an awfully long time to get there. And we had a very quick start. Like, we really, things were running along, things looked great. We then were starting to feel pretty confident. And each new turn, as we learn more and more about this Teal transformation and what it takes to actually build and sustain those internal systems, internal cultures, we'll hit hard patches where someone decides, this Teal thing, the self-management, just tell me what to do, right? And that confidence sort of fades, that the glow fades a little bit from it. But we're finding that every time we run into a rough patch, we do a little bit of internal review. We create a process or procedure or get rid of a rule that we had in place. We change the environment, kind of like a retrospective. And to date, every time we've done that, we've grown more. We've climbed out of any of those rough patches, and that seems to be moving us organizationally to a higher and higher level. Every time we hit some challenge, sounds extraordinarily cliche, but it forces us to understand better what Teal means, not in the abstraction, but in the real day-to-day life of a person working at LitheSpeed. What rules do we need to relax? Because people can actually take it in self-management. What processes do we need to put in place? What data needs to be in place so that people can understand and truly self-manage? A lot of people talk about empowerment in organizations, and I feel that we're actually doing real empowerment. A lot of the talk is empty. There are many, many, many decisions that LitheSpeeders make on a day-to-day basis that they traditionally would have had to ask their managers, ask the founders to be able to make that decision. In my mind, empowerment means two things: the authority to make a change and the skill and knowledge to be able to know how to do that in a responsible way. I use the analogy of the car keys. I have a 12-year-old son. I could empower him to drive the car by handing him the keys and say, okay, buddy, there you go. The reality is he needs to understand how to drive before real empowerment can happen. And I think that's where we at LitheSpeed are growing, both individually and organizationally, to make that real empowerment happen. And for us, the road ahead looks teal. I personally will not work in an organization if somehow LitheSpeed, which I can't imagine that it would, moves away from this path. I will not be moving with them. The road ahead looks teal for LitheSpeed, but more importantly to me, that is that's what keeps me at LitheSpeed, keeps me excited, keeps me engaged, is that my passions around Teal and around working with great people are fed and nourished by LitheSpeed's move to Teal. So I'll be there right along trying to make it work with everyone else at LitheSpeed, hopefully pulling in the same direction. But for right now, the road ahead looks teal. And
so
with
we have
that,
a couple of questions coming in.
Yeah, great. I wanted to open up for questions. So.
Yeah, so how long ago did we start this Teal process, and how far are we?
Well, so the first question is easy. We're a little over a year and 3 months in the process. That's the easy part because I know when we officially started. How far along is one of those questions like how agile are you? Teal is a journey and not necessarily a destination. And so I think on the things that we know we want to tackle, I'd say we're probably 70% there, but at every new stage we learn more about where we could get. So I see it as like a lean journey of constant, continuous improvement. I think our next big hurdles are around open financials, greater financial management by the entire company rather than just a few that have the context. But I don't think we'll ever be able to declare that we've arrived. We're always going to be improving and moving.
Great. And the next question was, how large of an organization are we?
Right now we're at 17 folks, including the founders, and we're growing reasonably rapidly. That doubled. We've sort of doubled since we started the road to Teal, and we're I sort of look out, and our goal for the end of 2018 was to be at about 30 to 50, so we're looking to double again as well. Now, that is an interesting idea because we're doubling in employees, but we're also, one of the things I think we will try very soon is how do we pull the folks that contract with us who are long-term partners but independent, how do we start to pull them into some of this self-managing culture? And I think that's an exciting thing. We're not quite tackling that yet because we're still trying to solve some internal issues, but there will always be new exciting challenges ahead.
All right, great, thanks.
Other questions?
Nothing that's coming in here, but we are approaching the top of the hour.
So if folks are interested, we'll share certainly my contact information, and you're welcome to email me, call me if you'd like. I'm happy to talk about this. I'm obviously passionate about it, and I'm sure we'll have more reports in the future as to what we've experimented with, what we're trying now, and if folks are interested in trying to incorporate some of these concepts into their organization, I'm sure we would love to chat with you about how you might be able to do that.
Yep, all right. So thank you everybody so much for attending. We really hope that you enjoyed it and learned a little bit, and we will be sticking around for a couple of minutes here to answer some of these additional questions, but definitely wanted to let people sign off if they wanted to. Be sure to check out our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram at LitheSpeed for more updates on upcoming webinars, our events, and of course classes and the like. And if you'd like to stay and chat, we're going to be here. If not, thank you so much again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. All right, so Bob, we do have one more question that's coming in.
Right.
Let's see. Would you say that the Teal process is helping to grow income at the same pace?
That's a little hard to judge. We certainly have remained at the profitability has been stayed similar. What I think has happened is we're running a lot more innovative experiments than we have in the past, and I suspect that some of those will pay off and bring in additional lines of business, additional ability to grow.